Hello everybody, and welcome to Art Smart. Now, let's pretend instead of being in a vehicle right now, I was in a time machine. Let's say this is the DeLorean for Back to the Future, and I am taking you back in time to the year 1900. You know, we got the flux capacitor up and going, and now we're back in the year 1900. And let's say we go to an office, and we are standing around the office water cooler. Actually, you know what? There was no water cooler. The office water bucket. And let's say we were talking to people. Do you think that you would hear gossip about celebrities? Do you think that you would hear about what's happening in politics? Maybe some international events, discussion about that? Well, actually, you probably would. And you might be surprised to hear that if you know a little bit about technology and history. Now, if you think there was no TV at that point, so it's not like you could get news across that way. There was no national newspapers at that point. There were some newspapers that had syndication, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but there was no national newspaper that was being used across the U.S. There was no radio at that point. So how would people know what's going on across the world pretty much every single day and be able to have that kind of office gossip? The answer would be the comic strip. Now, when I talk about the comic strip, most people probably are thinking that it's a not very important art form at this point. And arguably, maybe that's kind of sort of true, as the comic strip in recent years has really fallen in popularity because, quite frankly, most of the newspapers that used to carry these comic strips on a daily basis are now gone. Now, there is the possibility of somebody seeing a comic strip online and a online newspaper, but let's face it, most people don't really read comic strips online either. They get their news quickly on Google, Yahoo, whatever. And so people don't have the same amount of respect, I think, today for what comic strips once were. I would like to take the next week to talk to you a little bit about the comic strip, its place in, really in many different facets of American culture. You can talk about how it affected American politics. You can talk about how it affected the spread of art. You can talk about how it spread culture and knowledge throughout the United States. And of course, you can also look at the comic strip itself as a important and vital work of art. Now, let's take a few minutes to talk about the origins of the comic strip. In 1440, there was the printing press that was created by Gutenberg in Germany. And this was a monumental moment in human history. Most people don't realize how important the printing press really was, as they think at that point people were able to still write to one another. Books had been around for many, many years, and scrolls many, many years before that. So why would the printing press be so important? The reason that it was so important was the printing press allowed people to share a lot of information quickly and be able to print many copies of it. Imagine if you were trying to sell a book and you had to write down each and every word of your book over and over and over again, copying it over and over and over again just to get out however many copies you could do by hand. It would be crazy, right? Well, that's how the world was up until that point. But in 1440, the printing press allowed you to just once write up whatever it is that you wanted to say, and then be able to print it over and over and over again. Now, almost immediately, artists picked up on the fact that this is a new tool that they could use to make their art. And you start seeing etchings that were duplicated and printed. Albrecht Dürer was probably the most important artist from that period who kind of figured out that he could make his art using the printing press and really sell himself across the world through the printing press. However, it's just one image at a time and not a strip. It would take many, many years for the idea of the strip to really take place. Now, after the printing press really got its start and people really started to realize how powerful a tool it was, there was a transfer of power, and the transfer of power went to the printing press people that realized that they could create pamphlets. Pamphlets were a way for people to get across political or just whatever kind of propagandistic idea that you wanted to put across relatively quickly and cheaply, and then get it to tons and tons of people. Today, when we look at a pamphlet, we simply see it as this kind of annoying thing that somebody shoves at you, and you kind of pocket it, and then eventually you throw it away, as it's just this annoying piece of paper in your pocket. However, the pamphlet originally was an extremely powerful tool to make sure that people understood your worldview, they understood what was happening around the world, and it would also get people to take action. Virtually no president that came before 1900 was able to become president without having access to a lot of pamphlet makers. Because when you had these pamphlet makers, they were pushing your ideas all over the place. And of course, inside of these pamphlets would be a very important tool, and that would be the political cartoon. The political cartoon was a single image in most cases, and it would have a quick, simple idea that they would put across. The easiest way to get an idea across to people, instead of making them read a big long pamphlet, is to have a simple illustration that shows your point. And so these political cartoons became quite popular. In fact, they continue to be popular well into the 1800s. Now, newspapers started to spring up all over the place, especially as it became a little bit cheaper to make printed papers. And you would sometimes see newspapers pick up these pamphlet images and these political cartoons, and they would print them. They would basically pay whoever did the pamphlet to take the image, and they would put it in the newspaper, and it was a way to sell newspapers. And it oftentimes worked quite well. A lot of newspapers were sold. But there was a big problem that would happen if you became overly reliant on this kind of image. The problem is, it is a singular image that helps you for one day. Yes, you can reprint that image maybe on another day and see if you can sell another round of newspapers, but the fact is people would quickly get whatever that image is that's popular and funny, and they would buy it one day, and then the next day it wouldn't be there, and no one would buy the newspaper. So they had to find a way to make the political cartoon happen every single day. And what is the best way in order to have a idea expressed day in and day out in a singular form? It would be the comic strip. By the time you get to the 1890s, you start seeing the origins of the comic strip. And in the next video, we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But for now, suffice it to say that the political cartoon morphed into the social commentary cartoon, which became quite popular in the 1890s, and it really helped the comic industry expand and become much more of a household name over the next couple of decades. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you're enjoying learning a little bit about comic strips, and you'll continue to tune in with me throughout the week. This is Kevin Hogan, and this is Art Smart.